we're gonna switch up things one more time, and it's a new game that we've invented for the show just for you. And those it's going to basically be you unpacking a segment of what we call words that scare white people. Okay, so you've got I try to
Jacob
make it
Zuma.
Jake Zuma must go. God, that was funny. Zuma must
Yeah,
fall.
sorry, yeah.
No,
I just
Jake,
had to say that.
Jacob Zuma is not even scary anymore. They're more angry with Jacob, I think. But so try keep it concise, or what comes to mind first. And okay, are you settled in? Are you ready for the first one?
Yeah.
It segues perfectly from Fees Must Fall. Decolonization.
Ooh. So I mean, that scares white people.
I think so. I think anything that isn't too vanilla is fairly scary. Pepper at certain stages and applications can scare white people. So who knows?
I mean, I think in very simple terms, really the call that students would be making, the call for decolonization. Obviously, for non, when he explains, he says to end the world as we know it, and that's
Shout out
probably
for
where the
none.
fear comes from for white people. But really, the call that students are making is to say that for the longest time, our our schools of thoughts, the way in which we do things, and I think it ties in with what we spoke about earlier on about Model C schools. Our way of doing things, the way we speak, our languages, our history, have not found expression in the education system or even in the hegemonic narratives and discourse within society. Now, when we speak then about decolonization in that sense, we are saying that we must have an education system, or we must have a knowledge system which also looks and thinks like us.
Mm.
So for the long time, we've sort of been importing or been forced to do things the Eurocentric and the Western way. And I think a lot of scholars, for example, they speak about how part of the biggest thing that colonization does is that it takes a very singular and unilateral development of the West, and it comes and it puts it as it is in Africa, because it wants Africa to develop the same way the West does. It doesn't allow Africa to progress
Yeah, the
and
age
sort
of
of
enlightenment.
enter into its own age of enlightenment. So we are now forced to have a European age of enlightenment in Africa. Look, chances are we may not even had an enlightenment that even looks the way it looked in Europe, but we were cheated of that opportunity, because what decolonization does, it comes and it disrupts that process of development, because all societies develop. I mean, I'm against that. I hate that people always say, you want to decolonize, so we're going to go and you want us to learn under trees, and you want us
Mm.
to, all that racist stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
I
it's
even hate
terrible.
it when some black people say, for example, when they speak about decolonization, and then they want to reduce it to us wearing animal skin and
Mm.
singing around a fire and all those things. Look, all societies develop, and I think, and it's just a scientific fact. I don't think that we're going to. I think it's self-hate, and it's even racism in itself for us to think that we are going to be in a permanent state of learning under trees. There were ways in which we were going to develop. There were schools of thoughts. There was an enlightenment that we were going to have, but we were cheated that opportunity. So I think the difficult task that decolonization then tries to do is to say that let us have an Africa whose knowledge production, whose essence, whose culture, whose way of doing things represents Africa, and doesn't simply imitate that of the West. So I
Yeah,
mean, if
for sure.
white people fear that, I think.
I'm gonna just stop you there briefly. I apologize, but because we've got to try to keep these a tad briefer. And I mean, I hate to say, like systematic racism, the whole game was made up against you. So back against the wall. You can fire more shots over here. But the next point I want to, and I think we could talk again about decolonization forever. My one interpretation of it when I wrote about it in my thesis was that it's a quest or path for social justice, and whether that's through a Marxist lens or you attacking the means of production. And but I think what you said towards the end about an imitation has to be replaced with creation is very key. But the next word is white monopoly capital. Now people are scared when they read this in the papers because they think it's about them.
White monopoly cap. Do you know what? And I learned this recently. Well, I've always known this, but I think it came out again recently when I read something online. Because people like to attribute this term to, is it Bell Pottinger?
Yeah.
During the times of Gupta, this company who was
State
big in
capture.
PR,
Yeah.
who apparently manufactured this term. But if you look deep in the records of the liberation movement, the term white monopoly capital always existed. And really where this comes from is to say that in the African context, right, we and this is where Marxists and black Marxists have a big, well, Western Marxists and African Marxists have a debate to say that though there's a dynamic between the worker and the master in the West, between the rich and the poor, in the context of Africa, in the context of South Africa, if you are white, you are poor. If you are white, you are rich. And if you are rich, you are white. If you are black, you're poor. And if you are poor, you're black. Because the economic disparity and the economic inequalities and the economic oppression that happens in Africa is racialized, right? So if, for example, so the cause is the consequence, and the consequence is the cause. So when we speak about monopoly capital, for example, which is because this term white monopoly capital comes from an economic term, which is monopoly capital, but we can't simply speak about monopoly capital in South Africa as if we are in Europe or as if we are in the West, because monopoly capital in South Africa is racialized. It has a race. It's not just a monopoly in economic terms, but we must be able to locate that monopoly capital in South Africa is white. That's what we're going to call it, white monopoly capital. So that even in our fight against for social justice, and even our fight to try and change society for the better, we must be able to diagnose the problem. And the problem is that the economic disparities that exist in South Africa, they were racialized, and they remain to be racialized. So if we have to move from that point of departure, hence it's called a white monopoly capital. Because I always hear economists who are like, why are you racializing an economic term? And it's precisely what we're doing. We know it's an economic term. In economics, there's monopolies, but in South Africa, monopolies are white, because the people who own businesses, who own the banks, who constitute majority in the JSE, who own majority land, who own farms, who own mines, are white people. So we must then call it white monopoly capital, than us just generalizing it and saying monopoly capital.
For sure, and I think the big point there, well, not the big point, but the nature of white monopoly capital, it's almost become clickbait in any article that you read on the South African economy. And the main thing I took out of what you were saying there, and I think it's basically central to any problem we face in South Africa, whether it's service delivery, whether it's representation in the Springboks, and that's the simple fact that because of our past and our history, you cannot divorce class and race, and that's a massive problem and issue that we're going to have to, and our generations are going to have to spend time going after.